There comes a day when you must stop dancing for people who don't even clap for you. That day is the beginning of your freedom. Toxic people don't love you. They love control over you. They don't crave your presence. They crave the power they feel when they can push your buttons, dim your light, make you question your worth, or keep you tethered to their chaos. These are not relationships based on mutual respect, but arrangements built on manipulation, fear, guilt, and emotional blackmail. And the moment they sense they can no longer control your emotions, your choices, your peace of mind, they begin to retreat like shadows that cannot survive in the light. Control is their oxygen, and the moment you stop reacting, they start gasping. They test your boundaries, not because they're curious, but because they want to find the breaking point where they can bend you. They give just enough affection to keep you hopeful, then withdraw it to make you chase. They criticize you only to later claim it was a joke. They make you doubt your memory, your decisions, your instincts, but it's not love, it's a cycle, a trap, and it repeats until you decide it ends. They say things like, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, or that's not what I meant. Not to comfort you, but to erase the truth you're starting to feel. Because if you ever really trust your gut, if you ever really believe your own worth, you'll walk. And if you walk, they lose access. That's what they fear, not losing you, but losing the hold they have on you. Toxic people only attach themselves where there is an opening, and that opening often comes in the form of your kindness, your empathy, your habit of over-explaining, over-giving, or over-apologizing. They look for the parts of you that were taught to keep the peace at your own expense. They exploit your softness because it's easy for them to feed on someone who would rather feel pain than cause it. But their presence in your life is not a reflection of your weakness. It is a reflection of your light. And when you shine that light inward, when you start pouring all that energy back into yourself instead of trying to fix them or understand them, they begin to fade. Because the power they held was never real, it was borrowed. And the moment you reclaim it, the illusion crumbles. When you stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you, you take back your clarity. When you stop trying to prove your goodness to someone who benefits from making you feel not enough, you take back your self-respect. When you stop showing up in conversations where you're talked over, manipulated, dismissed, or guilted, you take back your voice. And when you finally walk away, not out of hate, but out of deep self-honor, you take back your life. Toxic people want you exhausted, because when you're tired, you're easier to control. They want you doubting yourself. Because when you don't trust your own thoughts, you start depending on theirs. They want you emotionally entangled, because as long as you keep trying to win their approval or fix the relationship, you're distracted from noticing how deeply they've been eroding your spirit. But there is a quiet power that rises when you stop engaging. Not in anger, not in spite, but in truth. The truth that you are no longer willing to abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. The truth that peace isn't something they can give or take from you. It's something you build when you stop giving toxic people the blueprint to your soul. You don't owe anyone access to your energy just because you once cared for them. You don't owe a response to manipulation wrapped in concern. You don't owe your presence to places that shrink you, confuse you, or silence your truth. You only owe yourself one thing: to be so deeply rooted in your worth that anyone who tries to uproot you is met with silence, not struggle. You don't fight to keep what drains you. You rise and release. And in that release, you become unreachable to anyone who only knew how to hold you by breaking you. The moment you stop feeding their need for control, they begin to starve. The moment you stop defending yourself in battles you never agreed to fight, they retreat. Not because they've changed, but because you have. Because control only survives where permission exists. Because energy flows where attention goes. Because when the power returns to you, the chaos ends where you decide it ends. There is a silence that follows every time you say yes when your soul is screaming no. It's the silence of self-betrayal, and that silence doesn't just echo, it scars. You may not feel it the first time, maybe not even the second, but over time it becomes a weight, a quiet ache under your skin, the kind that makes you wonder why you feel so tired, so resentful, so disconnected from your own life. The truth is, it's not the people who drain you that are the biggest problem. It's your refusal to set the boundary that would have saved you. You've been taught to keep the peace, to be agreeable, to not make others uncomfortable. You were raised to believe that saying no is rude, that asking for space is selfish, that protecting your energy is somehow unkind. But peace that costs your dignity, your time, your well-being is not peace at all. It's performance. It's pretending. And every time you avoid the boundary you need to set, you hand over another piece of your peace to someone else's comfort. People won't always like your boundaries, that's the truth, but it's also the very proof you need that those boundaries were necessary. People who benefit from your lack of limits will always take your strength personally. They'll call you cold, distant, selfish, dramatic, not because you are, but because you've stopped allowing them to sip from your cup while never refilling their own. Your boundary reveals the imbalance, and that truth stings. Not for you, but for them. There is a fear that rises in the chest when you think about speaking your truth. You worry they'll leave, that they'll be angry, that they'll misunderstand your heart. But beloved, ask yourself, why do you feel the need to shrink in order to be loved? Why must you fold yourself in half just to be accepted whole? A boundary is not a betrayal. It is a declaration, a line that says, this is where I end and you begin. This is how I love me while loving you. If someone cannot honor that, they were not honoring you to begin with. The boundary you fear to set is the gate between chaos and calm. It is the difference between constantly explaining yourself and quietly standing firm. It is what separates those who only take from those who truly see you. And you are allowed to be seen fully, freely, without performance, without apology. There's a reason your spirit starts to dim around certain people. There's a reason you feel drained after certain conversations. That's not in your head. That's not you being overly sensitive. That's your soul trying to tell you that a boundary is missing, that you've been too open in places that deserved your caution, that you've allowed people to treat your availability as obligation, your kindness as currency, your silence as consent. You cannot teach people how to love you if you're afraid to teach them how to treat you. And that lesson begins with a boundary, not a wall that keeps people out, but a sacred line that keeps your peace in. A line that says, I will not allow disrespect to enter here. I will not allow manipulation, guilt, chaos, or emotional violence to take up space in this temple I call myself. And when you set that line, you do it not in anger, but in honor. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much to keep bleeding for what doesn't heal. The first time you set a boundary, it might shake you. You might feel guilt rise up. You might second guess yourself. But stay still. Let the guilt pass. Let the discomfort rise and fall. That's not weakness, that's growth. That's you choosing long-term peace over short-term approval. That's you shedding the identity of someone who must always be agreeable, even at their own expense. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. They are the evidence of your self-respect. And if someone leaves because of your boundary, let them. Their exit is not your failure. It is your freedom. It is proof that your peace finally became more valuable than their presence. And peace, true, grounded, soul-deep peace, is the kind of wealth no one can steal when you learn how to guard it. Not with swords, not with noise, but with clear, unwavering, unapologetic boundaries spoken in the quiet power of knowing your worth. There is a sacred power in silence that many never come to know. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of suppression, but the silence that stands tall, anchored in dignity. It is the quiet confidence that refuses to beg for respect. It is the unshaken stillness that does not need to perform pain to prove worth. Silence, when rooted in dignity, is not weakness. It is mastery. And in a world addicted to noise, chaos, and constant reaction, silence becomes the loudest statement of all. Desperate people shout because they believe no one is listening. They shout because they think louder means stronger. But volume is not the same as value. Many raise their voice because they cannot raise their standard. They scream to be seen, to be heard, to be validated by the very ones who have no intention of understanding them. But that kind of shouting is not power. It is pleading dressed in volume. It is the exhaustion of someone who keeps handing out explanations to people committed to misunderstanding them. There is a moment in life when you stop arguing with people who twist your words, when you stop attending every emotional brawl someone throws your way, when you no longer chase people who turn their back and no longer shrink yourself to earn a seat at a table you built. That moment is when you learn the art of dignified silence. Silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've grown up. It means you've reached a level of awareness where your peace is no longer up for debate. It means you no longer feel the need to narrate your pain to be believed. It means you understand that real power isn't in proving, it's in preserving. Not everything needs your voice. Not every attack requires your defense. Not every loss is worth mourning out loud. Some things deserve your silence more than your explanation. Some people deserve your absence more than your energy. And some battles are best won by simply walking away, head held high, heart intact, spirit untouched. Because silence, when chosen from a place of strength, speaks a language only the wise can hear. There's a quiet roar in the woman who refuses to beg. There is a storm in the man who stops explaining. There is divine clarity in the soul that no longer reacts to every provocation. This kind of silence cannot be faked. It comes from deep inner work, from standing in the fire of your own worth and realizing that you are not made to prove what should be self-evident, that you are not here to water down your truth for anyone who refuses to taste its fullness. You learn that your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects to others their own chaos, their confusion, their need to provoke you to feel power. And when you no longer give them that reaction, they are left with themselves. That is what true silence does. It redirects the noise back to the source, not with vengeance, but with clarity. You step back, and in that distance, their manipulation, their need for dominance, their thirst for drama becomes exposed, naked in its own echo. But this kind of silence requires courage. It takes strength not to react. It takes discipline to not clap back, not defend, not explain yourself to people who don't value the explanation anyway. It takes self-trust to hold your peace when everything around you demands your fury. It takes maturity to choose stillness over retaliation. But when you do, something shifts. You no longer feel the urgency to be understood. You no longer need to prove that you were right. You just know, and knowing is enough. Silence, in its highest form, is not an absence of voice. It is the presence of wisdom. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows what they carry, knows what they deserve, and knows that their worth cannot be negotiated in arguments. When you reach this space, your silence becomes an act of self-love, a boundary, a shield, a sanctuary. You no longer burn yourself just to light the way for people who refuse to see you. You do not need to shout your pain. You do not need to plead for decency. You do not need to scream to be seen. Your silence, chosen with intention, is already doing the talking. And when that silence is dressed in dignity, it speaks volumes that noise never could. You are always teaching people how to treat you, not with words, not with lectures, but with what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you walk away from. Every boundary you set, every time you say no without guilt, every moment you choose your peace over pleasing someone else, you are educating the world about your value. And the most important classroom you'll ever stand in is the one called self-respect. Self-respect is not about arrogance. It's not about being unkind or untouchable. It's about recognizing your own worth before anyone else has the chance to decide it for you. It's about waking up and choosing not to beg for love, not to chase after validation, not to bend yourself into shapes, just to fit into someone else's narrow idea of who you should be. It's about knowing that you are enough without needing to be everything to everyone. If you don't respect yourself, the world won't either, because people take their cues from you. If you constantly apologize for existing, they'll believe you should. If you let them talk over you, they'll assume your voice doesn't matter. If you accept bare minimum treatment, they'll stop offering anything more. But when you honor yourself, when you move with quiet confidence, speak with truth, and demand alignment over attention, those who are meant for you rise to meet that standard. And those who are not fall away without needing to be pushed. Self-respect doesn't start with how others treat you. It starts with how you treat you. Do you keep your promises to yourself? Do you honor your time, your energy, your spirit? Or do you constantly put yourself last, hoping someone else will come along and recognize the value you refuse to see? You cannot teach people to cherish what you consistently abandon. You cannot expect others to see you clearly when you keep standing in your own shadow. There's a certain clarity that comes when you stop asking the wrong people to love you right, when you stop hoping toxic environments will one day nurture your growth, when you stop begging broken systems to see your light. That clarity is born from self-respect. It whispers, you don't belong here, and you don't have to stay. And when you listen, when you finally walk away from places that no longer serve you, something remarkable happens. Your life begins to align with your worth. But make no mistake, self-respect requires discipline. It demands that you say no to things that once felt familiar. It asks you to choose solitude over chaos. It invites you to grow, even when growing means being misunderstood. And it dares you to believe that your life can be full, whole, and peaceful without approval, without applause, without attachment to things that deplete your spirit. People will test you. They'll test your boundaries, your patience, your sense of self, not always because they're malicious, sometimes simply because they don't know any better. But your response is where the lesson is taught. Do you shrink to be liked, or do you stand tall and stay rooted in your truth? Every time you reinforce your boundary without anger, every time you walk away with grace, every time you choose your dignity over someone else's comfort, you are teaching them how to treat you. This isn't about control, it's about clarity. Clarity that says, this is who I am, and this is what I will not allow. Clarity that says, I do not have to raise my voice to raise my standard. Clarity that speaks even when your mouth is closed, that radiates from your posture, your presence, your peace. When you walk with self-respect, you don't need to explain yourself. People feel it. They adjust or they exit. And sometimes the exits are the blessing. Because every time someone leaves after you set a boundary, it makes more space for someone who will honor it. Every time you stop chasing people who don't see your value, it creates room for the ones who do. Every time you choose yourself, not from ego, but from truth, you are rewriting the way the world is allowed to engage with you. So begin today, not with grand declarations, but with simple decisions. Say no where you used to say yes out of fear. Speak up where you used to stay silent. Take a breath before reacting. Walk away before explaining. Stand tall even if your knees tremble. Because every step you take toward honoring your self-respect becomes a step away from chaos, confusion, and compromise. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt, of respect that doesn't have to be earned through suffering, of peace that isn't bargained for. And the moment you decide to stop settling, to stop explaining, to stop abandoning yourself for temporary approval, that is the moment you start the most powerful lesson you will ever teach. There are people who will never give you the answers you seek, not because the answers don't exist, but because your confusion keeps them powerful. They thrive in the silence between what they did and what they won't admit. They linger in the gray areas, the unsaid, the unclear, because the longer you wait for closure, the longer they hold your attention. And as long as you're waiting for their apology, their explanation, their moment of truth, you are still standing in a doorway that was never meant to stay open. Closure is not always a conversation. It's not always that perfect scene you've played in your head, the one where they finally sit down, look you in the eyes, and tell you why they hurt you. It's not the message that never came, the remorse that never showed up, the clarity that never arrived. Sometimes closure isn't something they give you, it's something you decide. It's what happens when you stop knocking on the same door, hoping for a different welcome. It's when you turn around, not because you got what you came for, but because you finally understand that you deserve more than waiting. The people who leave you in limbo know what they're doing. They may not say the words, but silence can be strategy. Indifference can be control. Some people don't give closure because they know it keeps you tethered. They know that your longing, your questions, your hope keeps the connection alive in your mind. They don't close the door because your open wound benefits them. It feeds their ego. It keeps their options open. It lets them return whenever it suits them and leaves you wondering if maybe, just maybe, they cared all along. But that isn't care. That's manipulation dressed in mystery. That's presence without commitment, attention without intention. And you deserve better than breadcrumb affection. You deserve more than to be kept on someone's emotional shelf, dusted off only when their loneliness visits. Your worth is not a question mark waiting to be answered by someone who couldn't value it in the first place. You don't need their closure to heal. You don't need their confession to move on. You don't need their validation to reclaim your peace. What you need is honesty with yourself. Honesty that says, I waited long enough. That says, I see now what I didn't want to see before. That says, I deserve to be free, even if they never give me the key. Because the truth is, the closure you think you want from them is actually the permission you need to give yourself. You are allowed to walk away from unfinished stories. You are allowed to put down the weight of unanswered questions. You are allowed to stop replaying conversations, trying to rewrite the past. There is no prize for staying hurt while waiting for someone else to make it right. There is only the quiet pain of delay, delay in your healing, delay in your joy, delay in the new chapter waiting for you to close the old one. Healing without closure is not easy. It takes strength to forgive what was never acknowledged. It takes courage to release what was never explained. It takes maturity to find peace in the mess of unresolved endings. But you can do it. You can decide that their silence is all the answer you'll ever need. You can let their lack of accountability be the very reason you stop asking for it. And in that decision, you take your power back, not by forcing them to see your pain, but by refusing to carry it anymore. You are not weak for wanting closure. That desire is human. It's natural to want to understand, but don't let that want keep you stuck in cycles of disappointment. Don't let it convince you that healing is on hold until they finally come around. Closure is not a gift. They don't hold it. You do. It lives in your choice to move forward without the apology. It lives